Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're here today to talk really about how do we manage risk and ensure continuity for our organizations. Um, Obviously, when a situation, a disruption happens, right, is not the time you want to figure out that your continuity strategy may not be working as intended. So today we'll cover how to plan for, how to think about and manage risk in the event of an unforeseen or unexpected issue or event. Let's start by introducing our panelists. Brian, let's start with you, please, sir.
Yeah, sure. Brian Stassney, I'm a cloud architect here at Zerto, supporting Otava. Been here for about 4 years. Definitely quite a bit of experience in the cloud space, and looking forward to the conversation.
All right, Jason, over to you.
Morning, afternoon, everyone. Jason Duchnowski. I am with Otava. I'm based here in Denver, Colorado, and my core responsibilities is a product manager for our backup and DR solutions.
All right. Appreciate you gentlemen joining us today. My name is Jeremy Bigler. I head product and product strategy for Otava, and I'll be your moderator for today's discussion. So with that said, folks, let's keep this discussion conversational. You have a Q&A panel in your meeting control plane. Feel free to use that. Ask questions as things come up you'd like to dive deeper into, and we'll try to handle those in real time. With that said, let's dive in. So to start off today's conversation, right, this is all part of a holistic continuity planning strategy. I'm not sure how many of you here have done end-to-end continuity planning within your organizations, but as we've seen, certainly during unexpected events, hardware disruptions, ransomware, et cetera, as well as pandemic disruption, right? Continuity becomes a key component for organizational preparedness and risk management. With that, we really think about continuity in a number of disciplines. Incident and emergency response is the coalition or coalescence really of a couple of different areas of management: IT disaster recovery, continuity management, crisis management, and then crisis communications, right? And I'm sure with certainly the pandemic as well as other unforeseen issues, you probably have had some hands-on experience in managing through at least one or a few of these already. But let's take a little bit of a deeper dive. We're going to try to break this down into some meaningful, digestible chunks today. And we're going to really talk about disaster recovery management and 4 key elements of planning here that we'll break down throughout the morning's conversation, really around program initiation, business impact analysis and reporting, plan development, including IT plan development, as well as operational considerations. And last but not least, a life cycle rollout, management, training, and review and iteration of the plan as a true life cycle document for your organization. With that said, at a high level, let's really dive in now to the risk analysis. So we think about risks, right, as things that may be areas or concerns or opportunities for disruption within our organization. Jason, can you take us through maybe some of the top concerns here and how they may affect us?
Yeah, absolutely. And you see kind of the top 3 there on the list from this chart here: business interruption, pandemic. That's very specific to kind of the times that we're in, obviously. Cyber incidents. What is a business interruption? That could be any number of things. Being in the IT world, when IT systems go down, that could be considered a business interruption. If something happens to the physical building that prevent you from just operating your business, that can be considered an interruption. I think that what we've seen, especially lately in the news, is more around cyber incidents. There's any number of things really that could get kind of bundled into here. Obviously, ransomware is one of those top of mind things where my data is encrypted and now I can't operate my business unless I pay some kind of a fee to, the ransomware folks. Another idea here is something called ransom cloud. I don't know if you guys have heard this term before. Ransom cloud is specific to public cloud attacks. A lot of these incidents are going after Office 365 applications, as an example. So there's a ton of things that are lumped into cyber incidents, and those are actually increasing over time. And another thing could be market developments. Think, what is market development business risk? That could be kind of correlated in with the pandemic, where my market that I'm in, that I'm operating within, is changing, and it could be changing rapidly, and maybe I'm not developing my business and to kind of go along with where the market is driving towards. So if I need to operate remotely, if I'm not able to, if I'm a restaurant trying to deliver food, those types of things could be considered business risks. So
one point there, I think, Jason, that may be worth mentioning, right? You're all familiar with the chip shortage that we're seeing, right? Intel just did a review, or an interview rather, of that. Pat Gelsinger over there talked a little bit about their supply chain concerns, but that could be a good example of a market disruption, right? Something that we have no control over, but yet it could meaningfully impact our business. So how do we think about that? How do we understand and quantify that risk? And then how do we plan on mitigating that risk? Brian, I know that you had some thoughts here really around ransomware, et cetera. What's your position here?
Well, sure. So, to Jason's point, what's top of mind? What's in the news almost every day? Another company being impacted by ransomware. Think most recently, Colonial Pipeline made the national news. If you're in the Northeast and unable to get gas for about a week, it's because of a ransomware event. Or a trusted tool that you have in your organization gets compromised at some point. Think SolarWinds. There's so many ways that these, in some cases, state-sponsored organizations are looking at your organization, whether it be hamper an industry or just for the purposes of getting a collection based on ransomware. But beyond that, the thing that's top of mind that people don't generally relate to potential outages or threats to business is climate change. This impacts us a number of ways. I'm in Houston, so of course in the Gulf Coast, this is primarily more and more frequent and more intense hurricanes, as an example. In the West, it's wildfires. Of course, in Texas too, we apparently freeze and the entire power grid shuts down on occasion. That's a thing now. So the threats to your business are evolving. You just have to be prepared.
Makes sense. And last but not least, one thing, folks, that I think is important to point out here, we think about this as affecting our business, right? And we just gave an example of market, some market drivers, but let's think about some of the other maybe socio-political impact, right? So a lot of organizations here in the US outsource help desk services, call centers, et cetera, right? One such major provider of that is the Philippines, and they just released a much more stringent lockdown protocol now that will affect employee availability for those environments. How are we as an organization handling not just our own internal disruptions as they affect our supply chain, but also our third party or partner organizations that may also affect our supply chain? And these are all things that need to be considered when we think about our risk profile from an organization. So keep in mind, plan for risks not only affecting you, but also affecting any third parties or partners that you use in your delivery of product and services. Let's talk about really some of the quantifiable impacts, right? Jason, take us through a little bit here. And team, we're not trying to scare you, but we do really want to give you a very fact-based approach to really what the true impact is of some of these risks. Jason, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. So, if you look at these numbers, kind of moving from left to right, what we're looking at on the left side is cost of downtime. It's per minute, and this is a Gartner statistic that is averaged over a pretty broad polled audience. Next is length of downtime. So if half of the organization's being down for a full workday, so that means more organizations are down for longer than a full workday. What does that mean? What would that mean kind of for your business? The middle statistic is unfortunate. It's really tied to small businesses, right? So if a small business is attacked or has an interruption, 2/3 of them are closing their doors within 6 months. And one statistic that kind of add on top of that I read recently is 95% of credit card data breaches come from small business attacks. So there are a lot of instances of this happening. It's not just oh, I'm a small business, I'm probably not on the radar because I only see the big names out in the news. That's just not the case. The next one I think is an encouraging number. That's 74%, right? We're talking about prevention. If I had maybe the proper plans in place and technology in place, I could have potentially prevented that incident from happening. So that's an encouraging number. And then, I think for as far as brand reputation goes, you remember those names of some of the big companies that have been hit by data breaches and have had incidents. Marriott's one that comes to my mind from last year. They had a very large data breach. I think it was 5.6 million clients that had their information compromised. That's all about perception. So would I do business with that company again? So there's some long-term lasting effects of these interruptions. It's not just the one day that I'm down is really where all these numbers are coming from. It goes far beyond that.
Brian, any thoughts here as we think about impact from your perspective?
Yeah, so I think that last statistic is most telling. And it's not just the business that you'll lose during a downtime event. We're used to having everything instantaneously. If I want something, I want to buy a new pizza stone, I go to Amazon and order it and it'll be here the next day. But if I go to Amazon.com and it's down, how long will I wait before moving on to a competitor? I've seen statistics that say that's about 5 minutes. If Amazon stays down, maybe go to Walmart.com. Maybe they get my business from this point forward. Maybe go to eBay. Point being, it's not just the cost of the outage, it's the potential cost of customers that may just move on. Whether it's because their data was leaked or you just weren't accessible when they needed it, it's an ongoing impact, and that can't be understated.
I won't ask for a show of hands. Obviously, I want a webinar, but I am curious in our audience, right? Think about your own experiences here. How many of you have had an impact like this, right? Anywhere from a hardware failure to maybe a breach or ransomware attack, hopefully not, to maybe somebody hitting a telephone pole outside your organization or another service level disruption, right? And the impact that made or caused for your business and how you had to scramble perhaps to shore up and restore services. Keep that in your mind as we talk about the impact analysis. Jason, why don't you take us through sort of the concept behind a business impact analysis, and what are the things or the process that we should follow here?
Yeah, so really, I think probably the important thing to just level set with is what is a business impact analysis. Some of us may not know, depending on kind of where you are in the organization, but really what we're looking at, the process of determining kind of the criticality of different business activities, resources required, how do I continue operating my business during an interruption, right? So when we're looking at kind of just the BIA, we are trying to quantify the impacts of those disruptions. What are the risks to the services? What's the recovery time? This is where RTO and RPO come into play. And then this analysis really goes directly into developing a strategy, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later. The strategy and the plan for how am I going to ensure that the right technology is applied to the right the right application and the risk that's associated with that application. So we talked about what are kind of the risks to the business. That's kind of off on the right side, right? So after the fact, I may lose some customer confidence, my integrity of the brand, all those things are impacted through kind of a downtime incident, or maybe it's a compromise of data. So the steps kind of listed out there on the left side. So I'm going to be scoping out, okay, what are all the things that I need to analyze for my BIA? So all the important applications associated with my business and the processes for the business. I'm going to be doing interviews to understand, what is the process flow? What is the impact if that application is down? What else is it kind of connected to within the business? Because there are interdependencies of some of these applications. And then I'm doing that really across the entire business, but I need to kind of chunk it up into maybe departments or some kind of a logical set so that I can see this kind of in a chunk by chunk fashion. So at the end, what's created is really an assessment summary. And that assessment summary, I kind of talk a little bit about, what it's going to show, but, real costs, what is the criticality? It's really going to help you. It's the foundation of, what does my continuity plan need to look like? So this is the pre-step to it. So, we'll talk to a lot of customers about, what are your RPOs and RTOs? And it's not unusual to get kind of that glossy-eyed look on their face and see that because they haven't done some of that, the initial work to understand what is the true cost of the business.
Fantastic. So as Jason mentioned, right, we've done a risk assessment, right, all the things that could potentially happen, and we weighted those risks based on assumed potentiality, right? What is most most likely versus what is least likely, right? We've done a business impact analysis where we've understood really our key business systems or processes, the impact of the business for those processes to be disrupted. And then what is our ability to recover, right? What is our acceptable amount of downtime, and what should be our recovery objectives based on that acceptable level of downtime? And that's obviously, right, we think about this ideologically, and that's near zero or zero, right? I want to be always up, always available, right? But there's a dollar sign associated with that. So it's weighted by budget. And there's a medium or a negotiation there between the business and other members of leadership around what should be the right level of acceptable downtime. All of this is then captured in an impact report. And the purpose of an impact report is to really communicate to the business continuity management team, its stakeholders, usually the leadership in the organization, but also the organization overall, around really three key data points, right? What are the major activities of the business? What are your business processes? How do you go to market? How do you collect revenue? How do you manage and maintain your business operations, right? Those types of processes are all considered major business processes, right? Each one of those business processes has likely a different level of acceptable downtime. And it's based on the criticality of that business process, the impact to that business should that process go down. Jason did a great example, or Brian, or rather, around Amazon, for example, right? How many millions of dollars per second downtime is assumed there if something should happen? Now that may be an enterprise level example, but a smaller version of that is what's the financial impact? What are some of the other impacts at a business process level for our organization? The second is it identifies the resource requirements, right? What is required to support that business process? And then third and finally is what are the recovery requirements for that business process? And this factors into our maximum tolerable downtime. It factors into then our recovery points. And I'm sure many of you know what RPO is, but I'll cover that just briefly for clarity. If we look down to the lower right here, right, our recovery point is the amount of data that we want to protect, or how much data can we lose? Can we lose 5 minutes of data? Can we lose half an hour of data? Can we lose a day of data, right? That's our recovery point objective. And that is typically deals with our backup strategy, our replication strategy. How am I protecting my data and the information I'm generating? How much do I want to make up potentially? Our recovery time objective, different to that, is how quickly then do systems have to be up and running. And these are two different numbers, right? They're not usually the same objective, right? So how long can that process be down? My payroll system may be able to be down for 24 to 48 hours, depending on when it occurs, right? My ERP may be down for a few minutes to a few hours, right? My e-commerce site or my website where I process my business and my transactions, I may want that back up and running almost instantaneously, right? And again, the business impact analysis will help us think about the criticality based on the impact of the business for those systems. That all factors into this planning report. The planning report should include, again, high-level description of each of those business functions, maximum downtime, as well as our recovery objectives. But it should also detail, right, the activities that we're going to perform, the resources that are required for those activities, the relationships, right? Again, remember, when we think about relationships, it's not just within our business, but many of our organizations today use external service companies or external services in support of our business. My web hoster, right? My call center, my support desk, I may outsource other pieces of my service delivery. I may have a just-in-time shipping and fulfillment center. All of those have to be factored into this plan. Key personnel, contact information, systems, right? That all factors into the plan structure that we'll talk about here in a moment. And then the prioritization, which of those business processes are absolutely critical? What do I have to maintain near zero downtime versus what can I live with, a longer or more extended period, right? And it all translates back to that business impact analysis. So again, folks, any questions that come up during this, please feel free to fill out your Q&A panel. We'll try to answer this live, but I'm hoping this sort of makes sense for how we start to think about continuity management. This is really starting our first phase of management of continuity and risk mitigation. Brian, from your perspective, right, you've seen a number of organizations go through this process. Anything here that you'd like to add from your perspective?
Well, let's say that the business impact analysis is critical, right? So you as an organization have determined that you need a DR solution. So how do you go about defining that? Well, that impact analysis is going to be your first step. That's going to define what your requirements are for the things that, Jeremy, you just mentioned: maximum tolerable downtime, your RPO and RT objectives. That business impact analysis is going to set your requirements for whatever solution and partner you partner with for that solution. We need, maximum X amount of downtime in RTO or RPO, seconds or minutes. That's going to define which solutions are viable and which are not. Using those metrics, you can immediately rule out or rule in a number of solutions. So that really is going to be your guiding light, essentially.
All right. So thank you, team. We've talked about briefly the BIA and the impact report. Let's talk more now holistically about the steps involved in putting a holistic plan together, starting with those components. The first thing we want to do, right, is initiate the process. Now, we've talked a little bit about initiate already. We've talked about the business impact analysis. We've talked about the impact report. The next step of this phase really revolves around gap analysis, right? Our impact report is going to identify for us really the utopia of a continuity strategy for the organization. We're probably not going to be anywhere close to that day zero. So where do those gaps lie, right? What can we do today versus what do we want to do tomorrow as informed by the impact report? That gap analysis really then starts to inform our activities that we needed to undertake to close those gaps and to get us to the recovery objectives that the business has reported they want to see at a services level. Now, a few things about the gap analysis to consider. Beyond just tools and data, what other non-technology components do you need to include, right? How will users who today may be remote with the pandemic and potentially a resurgence of the Delta variant, how are they going to access those tools and data from potentially a remote location? How are they going to do that without complexity? Because the last thing we want to do in a recovery or continuity plan execution is deal with a lot of complexity right? Because that's only going to delay our recovery time objective. And most importantly, folks, and this is a key issue, how do we do that without sacrificing security? Think about the pandemic, right? When the first impact of the pandemic hit, right? Now a lot of organizations are scrambling to enable remote access. And for some organizations, the security manual got put aside and they just tried to connect people into tools and resources, right? What happened is we saw an immediate spike in ransomware and other malware attacks because a lot of the security best practices and principles were paused to reestablish that connection. Studies have shown, incidentally, that the most vulnerable time for an organization is during the execution of a continuity strategy, because recovery time becomes our key driving principle, not security and compliance. So we have to balance the two. Don't forget about one to gain the other. And then last but not least, one point that we'd make here is, although we have a toll gate for stakeholder review in the initiate phase, stakeholders need to be kept engaged pervasively through this process, right? This is really a negotiation between IT and the business around what the business can afford and will pay for and expects, and IT on what IT can deliver and empower the business from a recovery objective perspective. And that negotiation and that partnership is critical throughout all of the phases here, as we'll talk about in a moment. So question is, do you include executive management as part of the process? Absolutely. So executive management, right? We talk about the concept of a BCM, or business continuity management team. One of the stakeholders on that team is always an executive leader or sponsor. And that is to ensure we have the right strategic view and perspective. The business is going to have objectives on recoverability and on resiliency, right? That they're going to ask the continuity team to deliver. And that negotiation is going to be critical to include business stakeholders and leadership in, because both parties have to agree. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a scenario where one expects something the other is not delivering. Now, when we move into plan framework, Jason's going to add some additional detail here, but one of the most critical tasks of the plan development is the framework. Jason, can you take us through some of the details here, please?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the framework is really, I think it's a perfect term for it, because it should be something that's kind of all encompassing. There's a lot of different scenarios that can occur when we are kicking off a continuity recovery for my business, right? You know, the number of scenarios that we went through of maybe it's a natural disaster or it's ransomware or, you know, whatever the case is, I need to be able to accommodate kind of at least at a minimum, the major business interrupters that I can, and have a plan that, again, kind of ties back to that business impact analysis to make sure that we're focused on, you know, the most important applications first. And then, you know, it kind of, in addition to that, not just worrying about the technology, but how am I going to communicate within my organization depending on the scenario, right? So if my phone system goes down, how do I communicate? If the entire you know, production site goes down because of a tornado, how do I communicate? And make sure that you have a defined path of how am I going to be notifying everybody, who's in charge of some of those piece parts, and then you know, kind of have additional, if I need to do some workarounds in the event that, you know, there's an off case, how do I handle kind of some of these different scenarios? So, you know, I'll give you an example of one that I was involved in personally. This was a while ago, but it was a financial services company, and the business was growing. We were doing a migration to a new storage platform. The platform, after the upgrade, was moving and operating so quickly that it ended up actually causing and identifying a bug within the DR software that was replicating. Just for a frame of reference, it was not Zerto, that DR software, but the bug was found, and it actually took down their public-facing online banking system. So everything was working the way that it should, except for that DR software, the thing that's supposed to be protecting them. So long story short, they failed over to the DR site, and everybody was up and running. All the other communications and things were in place, but you need to have kind of that again. Who's in charge of what, making that decision to do the failover. The key there is I need to be able to fail over quickly and make my decisions quickly, because a lot of things can happen. And they just need to have kind of all that stuff laid out so you don't have to be making important decisions on the fly, right? You want to have all that mapped out.
Makes perfect sense. Thank you. Then team, in the recovery procedures, right, we answer the how, right? How will the plan be executed? What tools and processes will be used to recover, right? Who owns the recovery process, to Jason's exact point, right? Who's pulling what triggers? How are we socializing the plan so everybody knows their roles in the event of a disruption? Some points here that we should probably consider. Number one is, again, include your third-party vendors. I cannot underscore how critical it is to think about your entire service supply chain when you're thinking about continuity. Likewise, make sure you understand their continuity plan. The last thing you want to do is have your business impacted because one of your suppliers or vendors doesn't have a robust or mature continuity strategy. And that's again, something that really should be part of your vendor selection process if it isn't already. Secondarily, include consideration for hard copy or other non-digital types of information, right? As much as we're in the digital age and everything's computerized, there's always something that isn't, right? And make sure that you're factoring those into the process as well. And last but not least, include your employees and remote workers into this recovery scenario. Contract workers as well, right? Make sure that you've got a holistic access strategy so that your recovery and employee environments remain connected and up and running. And recovery should be seamless, right? Again, the last thing you want to do is have 1,000 questions flooding a help desk for how do I access in the middle of a recovery process. Brian, anything here you'd like to add around the recovery scenario?
Yeah, so it's critical to whatever solution you choose to have a DR runbook that's practiced and well understood. I mean, if a DR event happens, it's probably going to be at 3 a.m. on a Friday. You're already going to be in a stressful environment. You want something that is practiced and easy. You press these 3 buttons and you recover. It's not something you have to figure out. It's not tested. And at that point, DR testing is probably the most critical thing. I mean, you pick a solution, it's implemented, you're handed a run book, you're good, right? Well, for maybe a brief period of time, configurations change all the time. You could upgrade your vSphere version. You could add new VMs to an application. That initial configuration is going to change almost instantly. So constant testing or frequent testing is a critical thing. And the ability to do that seamlessly and at your convenience is also something you really want to look for in a solution. You need to not only initially verify that solution, but continually make sure it's still valid. And when you need it, it's going to be a stress-free operation or a relatively stress-free operation. You press a few buttons and your workloads come back online. But the last thing you want is having implemented, and then when you need it, it just doesn't work the way you thought it would.
Yeah, I couldn't have asked for a better segue, I think, right? Test, 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 and when you think you're good, test again. You can never test DR enough, right? And this includes both tabletop, which is a run through of the run book from a discussion standpoint. Does everybody know the roles so we have all the right processes established, and a full DR test. Pull the plugs out of the wall, cut the internet connection, actually do a live test and make sure that the plan executes and works as expected. And this is a living document, team. This is not something that's shelfware. A lot of DR plans end up like that. But our businesses, right? Think about the past 24 months and how much each of our businesses has evolved over that period of time. Our DR plan has to be in lockstep with our business evolution. Otherwise, we're going to end up at a point where we're going to try to recover and we're not going to get the results we expect. All right, so let's talk about some of the tactics now that we can use during that recovery process. Jason, why don't you take us through this concept here quickly?
I'll do my best to try and get through it quickly. Really what this is showing a lot of arrows going both directions, different layers of technology. We're kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of how, when I execute a recovery plan, what am I actually doing? And I think one interesting thing to kind of point out here, that maybe you kind of put in your head when you think of DR is, where is DR? Is DR really, I have a recovery site on one side and I have production on the other side? Or am I failing everything over, or certain applications? That's kind of where the procedures are really critical, because I may have 2 locations, 3 locations that are all interoperating with each other and speaking with each other. And maybe I have workloads actively running at different locations. So when I think of planning, I may be planning for my Acme Incorporated production applications. Where do they go? If I'm running in a hybrid architecture, that's really the ideal state, because now I can move applications in and out without business interruption. It looks identical experience to the customer, but now I have the flexibility of, okay, maybe this cloud is not working properly or delivering the level of service that I need. Now I want to dynamically move a workload to another location. So that's like ideal end state. Maybe not everything needs that level of abstraction, but the technology that's out there today, Zerto is a great solution for providing that kind of instant move over, with very little kind of interruption to the end customer. And it doesn't really matter, what cloud that I'm running in. If I need to come back, I could be doing things like this for even just kind of maintenance activities, right? It's maybe my planned downtime. How do I kind of move applications around? A lot of different concepts to talk about here. This can get really complicated. I think that's where, talking with someone that understands all the different layers and how the piece parts can get put together is really critical.
Yeah, absolutely agree. In fact, you brought up a good point there, Jason, around application maintenance and monitoring, right? Think about disaster recovery, or at least in this case, continuity, right? Where I want to move applications to the highest performant environment. If I have a degraded performing environment, right? Let's say one of my hosts fails in a premise-based environment, right? I may automatically want to shift my workloads over to a secondary environment while I remediate and bring that underperforming original production environment back up to speed again. That type of portability and mobility between applications and services really gives us that near zero or zero downtime or disruption experience for not just hard downs, but also degraded or slower than expected performance. Moving on, Jason, why don't you take us through a little bit about how do we think about a tiered continuity strategy?
Yeah, really all applications are not created equal. It's my application could be very critical to my business, where I may have another application that's simply just archiving data out for compliance purposes. So really the takeaway on this slide is applying the right technology to the right kind of level of criticality to the business, because those technologies drive different costs to the business. So again, going back to that BIA concept, that is helping inform really where the technology should be getting applied. So, if I'm looking at this chart and I see a tier 1 application as business critical, what does business critical mean? Well, in a lot of cases, it's the stuff that if it's down, it results in a loss in profit. It's my core business applications. Maybe I'm an e-commerce website, right? I can't process transactions. My shopping cart is down. Brian was talking about going on to Amazon and ordering, a pizza stone. What if I can't order it on Amazon? Maybe I'll jump over to, to Walmart, Bed Bath Beyond, you name it, because it's something that I want to order. And if it's down, then, I could be losing that business as an e-commerce website. So, absolutely critical. And I would lump in actually safety critical into this as well. So things that if that system was down, could lead to loss of life, serious injury. Think of like a control system for a chemical manufacturing plant. Those systems exist. So absolutely critical to make sure it's the recovery time is as short as possible, and that recovery point, that data loss aspect, is as short as possible. Business important, talking about kind of ERP systems, maybe invoicing and billing. Email could absolutely be lumped in here. It could even be a business critical. I think we're seeing it kind of move up the stack in this picture, maybe inventory systems, that type of a thing. And then at the bottom, data centric. So data centric is, think of large volumes of data. Maybe I'm just holding a lot of historical data out there, dumping stuff out to OneDrive that maybe I'm not going to touch but once or twice a year, stuff that is not as critical to make sure that it's up and running and I have access to it, immediately. It's still important to have a backup of it because it's business, great data to have that we've been generating as a business, but it's not something I need immediate access to. So this is all about applying, again, right technology to the right importance of that data in the application.
Would you say a good mantra here, Jason, is make sure that we're not under protecting or overspending for the application?
Yeah, that's really the core of it. Money is a limited resource, so let's apply it appropriately. So I guess, from an Otava perspective, how do we see that continuity strategy? How are we applying the right technology for your applications, for your business, to meet the objectives that you've defined in that BIA? We're incorporating things like, a disaster recovery plan. Some of these technologies have that kind of that feature sort of built into it, right? Where I can define a recovery plan. And that's absolutely where, the business critical fits in. We partner with Zerto to provide disaster recovery services to our clients. I've been doing it for over 5 years now, and that is a great technology to plug into for that tier one. I am continually replicating data. I can recover very quickly. I have a lot of applications critical to the business, and I need a reliable technology there. So that's a great fit. A pure DRAS solution is absolutely in that business critical category. Business important. Oftentimes, if I only need to recover within the day, I'm looking at backup solutions. So I'm backing up data and then physically having to move that data off of that backup system in order to recover my application. So it's going to take some time in order to do that. I want to make sure, same concepts as a DRAS solution, I want to make sure I get that data offsite. Something happens to my primary site. How do I recover in the event that data is not available locally? I maybe have some tier 2 applications that fit in that category that I still want to be able to recover at a secondary location in case my primary is down. Data centric, I just need to get the data offsite. I need something cheap. That's really where S3 comes into play. That's just kind of cheap and deep storage. It's not as important of data to have up and available immediately, but I need to make sure that it is there, it's available. We have a great solution for that as well. So again, yeah, we're plugging in the right technology at the right cost to the need for the business. So we can help you guys navigate the waters here with our portfolio.
Brian, from your perspective, anything here that you think would be appropriate to share?
Well, so I agree with everything that Jason said. I mean, the solution that's chosen needs to meet application requirements, and every application is different. Some applications need to be online immediately. In the case of a DR event, others, maybe secondary systems, you can take a little bit longer. You can have a little bit longer RTO. But Zerto definitely fits in those tier 1 workloads. Continuous replication, RPO in seconds, RTO in minutes. That's where really, our focus is getting those tier 1 critical applications back up and running as quickly as possible. And we would love to protect all of your workloads, across the board, the entire organization. But really, it's the critical workloads that we're focused on.
Got it. Thank you. So Folks, let's talk a little bit about outcomes, right? We don't do things in a vacuum, right? There's got to be a demonstrable benefit to the organization. So thinking about what a good risk management and continuity strategy would give us, first and foremost, right, the business remains operational during a disaster. Now, again, disaster can be loosely defined. It's really anything that would impact our customers' experience or the experience of our internal employees or consumers, right? They happen at the worst possible times. They're not planned, right? And businesses need to recover quickly and efficiently from them, right? And a well-developed continuity management strategy helps give you peace of mind to know that you can recover in the event that something may occur. Part and parcel with that is expensive downtime, right? Now, expensive downtime, yes, it can be thought about in terms of revenue, but it can also be thought about in terms of human capital, right? If our company becomes impacted, right, how many hours of resources do I need to allocate to that to recover quickly, right? Am I losing a lot of productivity in trying to execute a recovery time? Or am I able to do that very, very efficiently and effectively with the minimum amount of disruption, right? And again, the last thing that we want to do during a recovery scenario, because we're already up to our ears in probably phone calls and red tape, right, is to go through additional complexity of end user connectivity or trying to communicate recovery processes out to the organization. So we want to make sure that the recovery strategy is seamless and low complexity. The third piece of this, right, is competitive advantage. Competitive advantage is pretty significant, right? We just talked about the Amazon experience potential there, right? Consumers today, we are in a on-demand world, right? I think we all agree with that, right? We expect what we want when we want it, delivered within arguably moments, right? Either electronically or physically. If I can't find my typical supplier able to do that for me, I'm going to find somebody else. And that is just the nature of the environment that we live in today, right? This is only exacerbated by the fact that we're predominantly now in an electronic or virtual world with pandemic. So as you think about how you compete in the market, your brand, your value, your perception to your prospect base, right? Having a continuity management strategy could be a key differentiator between you and your competition. Last but not least, right, is peace of mind and assurance to your employees. Employees, right, we want to make sure that they're engaged, they're positive, they know that they've got a comfort level in the fact that we are resilient and able to continue operations regardless of what may occur. We saw the impact of that during the pandemic, where employee uncertainty and fear was extremely heightened because many organizations didn't have a crisis management program or plan in place, right? So this type of engagement with our employees allows us to continue predictable productivity for our employees during the event of a disruption or an unplanned situation. And last but not least, peace of mind for the organization, right? Our board, our leadership, our extended stakeholders, right? All will feel more comfortable knowing that we have a plan in place to deal with the unexpected, right? With that said, I want to talk quickly about the Otava portfolio. Obviously, we're here to help with disaster recovery and data protection, but we're also here to help in other areas where we can, right? Secure and compliant cloud. We talked about hybridity, co-location, security, professional services. Otava's vision here really is to make your consumption of IT services easy and simple, allowing you to focus on your business, your core objectives, your core mission, and let us take care of a lot of the cost, complexity, and similar of making sure that your business stays operational and performant. I won't go into the details here. I am pleased about some of our recent awards. If you follow us on LinkedIn, if you don't, please do. But we've just received a number of awards in 2021, and really excited about what 22 is going to bring. So keep connected with us, and look forward to sharing those with you as well. As we start to wrap up, right, a couple things that I want to talk about here is don't think that you are alone in trying to navigate your continuity strategy for the organization, right? Everything from initial risk assessment through the BIA creation. Feel free to reach out and engage us. We are happy to help discuss that in more detail with you, walk through your individual scenarios, help share with you how other organizations, maybe in your industry or your customer size, have handled continuity, and give you that level of security to know that you're going to be protected in the event that something may occur. We hope not, right? But the insurance is there and available should something actually occur. The way to do that is real simple, folks. Just reach out and call us. No obligation. Happy to have a conversation with you guys and really walk through start to finish how to think about a continuity strategy. Incorporated within that, by the way, is how to pitch that to your senior leadership within the organization, right? Continuity tends to be one of the things that people realize they want but don't want to pay for. So how can you position that to key decision makers to get budget? Let us know. We're happy to help walk through that, do some cost analysis and impact analysis with you, and help you position that to your executive leadership for budgeting and go forward. Some things to keep in mind as we think about what's coming up. We've got the HIMSS conference coming up in Vegas. I'm not sure if anybody is going out to that, but you will in the follow-up to today's webinar, you're going to receive a copy of these slides. There's also going to be an invitation link in that deck for joining us for lunch at the HIMSS conference. So if you're going to be out there, would love to host you for lunch and have additional conversation. Feel free to take us up on that offer. And then also we've got our next webinar on the 26th of August for public sector, right? Ransomware mitigation and cybersecurity risk overview. So if you're in the public sector space, love to expose specifically how we deal with constituents and some of the compliance pressures there within the public sector space. With that said, I want to thank you for your time this morning. I want to thank you for engaging with us in continuity management. I again will issue the option. If any questions are out there, if we've triggered anything in your mind, drop a note into chat or into the Q&A section. We'll be happy to answer it for you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for joining. Thanks for your time.
All right. I think we've had our few awkward seconds of required Q&A. Then we will follow up today's webinar with a copy of this deck. Like I said, it will also include a link to lunch for HIMSS if you're going to be out in Vegas, and look forward to continuing the conversation. With that said, enjoy your day today, and look forward to taking the conversation to the next level with you. Take care now.